When I finally walked out of their house that night, the tamales still warm in my hands, I realized I wasn't just leaving their doorstep, I was leaving behind the version of me that had let their cruelty define me. The morning was quiet, but not empty. I sat in my little kitchen watching the soft sunlight filter through the window, casting golden streaks across the floor. It was spring in Maine, the kind of morning where the air smells fresh and new, and the world feels a little lighter. I wrapped my hands around a chipped mug, the warmth from the coffee soothing me as I took a sip. Outside, birds began their songs, and the wind rustled through the trees in a gentle dance. The house felt alive, breathing with me in its own quiet way. I sat there for a moment, just breathing it all in, the stillness, the comfort of my space, the slow, peaceful hum of my day-to-day life. There was something special about mornings like this. They made me realize how far I had come, how much had changed. But just as I settled into that thought, something tugged at me, pulling me back. My mind wandered to a memory, one that I hadn't thought about in a while. 5 years ago, on a Christmas Eve, much like any other, I found myself in a completely different place, both physically and emotionally. I had been in a kitchen just like this one, but it wasn't my own. It was a different home, in a different town, surrounded by a different kind of family. It was a night that began with the warmth of tamales I had lovingly prepared, expecting it to be a simple gesture of love. But that night, what should have been a moment of connection became one of deep change, a turning point in my life that would set everything in motion. It's funny how the past can sneak up on you when you least expect it, how a single memory can surface from the quietest of moments, carrying with it the weight of everything that has come before. And just like that, I was there again, standing in the kitchen, feeling a mixture of hope and something darker, something heavier. It was a night that would change everything, whether I was ready for it or not. It was Christmas Eve, and my heart swelled with anticipation. I had spent the morning preparing tamales, the kind I used to make with my mother when I was younger, the kind that filled the house with warmth and love. I wanted to share that love with my son Lucas and his wife Vanessa. I thought that maybe, just maybe this year the holiday could be different. I thought I could bring something personal, something from my hands to bridge the gap that had grown between us. The snow was falling gently as I made my way through the quiet streets to their home. The world outside seemed still, almost as if it too was holding its breath. I drove slowly, the familiar route comforting, yet laced with the nervous fluttering in my chest. I hadn't seen Lucas and Vanessa much lately, and it had been even longer since we'd shared a meal together. But I hoped this gesture would be the start of something. I arrived at their house with a tray of warm tamales, carefully wrapped and steaming with the promise of comfort. When I walked through the door, I expected a warm embrace, a smile, something that let me know they were happy to see me. Instead, there was Lucas, sitting at their sleek granite kitchen island, scrolling through his phone. His gaze barely lifted as I placed the tamales on the counter, a simple gesture meant to show love, to offer a piece of myself. I smiled, hoping to ignite a spark of connection, but he didn't look up. "I made these for you," I said, my voice full of hope. "They're homemade." I felt my words float in the air between us, fragile, vulnerable. Lucas barely glanced at the plate. "We're actually trying to eat clean this week," he said, his voice indifferent. The words felt like a slap, dismissive and cold, as if the food I had prepared with care meant nothing to him. And then there was Vanessa. She took a long sip from her mason jar, a drink, far too fancy for my taste. Her lips curled into a tight smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. She gave a half-hearted chuckle. "Oh, that's cute," she said. "Rent food," she added, glancing at Lucas. "Rent food," I asked, my voice faltering. The phrase caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" Lucas leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "You know," he said, shrugging as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Like the stuff poor people eat." His words landed in the room, like heavy stones sinking deep into the pit of my stomach. They weren't just about the food. They weren't just about tamales or Christmas. They were a condemnation of everything I had ever been, everything I had ever done for him. The work, the sacrifice, the late nights, all of it suddenly reduced to something unworthy, something beneath them. Vanessa's laugh followed soft and cold, like a knife twisting in my gut. It wasn't loud, not cruel in volume, but it was worse. It was dismissive, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience, something beneath notice. It was in that moment, more than any other, that I felt it, how invisible I had become to the people I loved. I stood there, the weight of their words pressing down on me, the tamales still steaming on the counter between us. I couldn't understand why they couldn't see me, not just as their mother, but as a person who had given everything for them, who had worked herself to the bone to make sure they didn't go without. Yet here I was, mocked. I stood there for a moment, my heart heavy in my chest. I had nothing else to give. I laughed a hollow sound, and I turned to leave. As I packed up the tamales, folding the foil over them, I said, "I'll take these then. No worries." But inside something broke. It wasn't the food. It wasn't the laughter. It was the realization that I had spent my life giving, and yet here I was still unseen. I left their house that night with a quiet pain that I would carry with me for a long time. I remember the night well, sitting in my small apartment, the heater rattling in the background, the ceiling above me peeling in places. I stared at my reflection in the window, whispered to myself, "Get real?" I didn't know what that really meant at the time, but I would learn soon enough. I sat alone in my apartment that night, the tamales still untouched in their foil, a cold weight of disappointment lingering in the air. As I stared out the window, my mind began to drift, not just to the harsh words Lucas had thrown at me, but to the many years that led up to that moment. I thought about the life I had built, or maybe more accurately, the life I had sacrificed. I had worked long hours cleaning homes for people who never took the time to even learn my name. I'd scrubbed toilets and mopped floors in spaces that were never mine, leaving bits of myself behind in each home I left behind. I did it because I had to. I did it for Lucas, for the future I dreamed of for him, a future where he wouldn't have to feel the sting of poverty, where he could have the things I couldn't give him. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of myself. I became a figure that existed only to serve to give to labor endlessly, without ever asking for anything in return. And then there was Daniel, my late husband. When he passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack all those years ago, it felt like the world had just folded in on me. One minute I was holding his hand at the kitchen table planning our future. The next, he was gone. The grief was suffocating, and I didn't have time to mourn. There were bills to pay, a child to raise. The day after Daniel died, I had to pack my bag for work, pretending to be all right, while the world shattered around me. I became both mother and father to Lucas. I became everything to him, and it was exhausting. But I did it. I did it because he needed me. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I pushed myself far enough, I could make life better for him. I thought that all those sacrifices would mean something, but the years of effort, the endless hours spent scrubbing and scrubbing, what did it all amount to? What did I get in return? The harsh, dismissive look Lucas gave me when he mocked my tamales, that was my answer. It was a reminder of all the invisible work I had done, of how much I had given, and how little recognition I'd ever received. As a mother, you tell yourself that the sacrifices are worth it. You tell yourself that someday, somehow, your child will understand. But here I was, years of hard work and sacrifice hanging in the air between us, and all I could see in Lucas's eyes was pity. Not gratitude, not respect, just pity. It was in that moment that I realized something. No matter how much I gave, no matter how hard I worked, Lucas would never see me the way I saw myself. He would never understand the weight of what I had carried. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and yet it was also a moment of clarity. I had spent my life measuring my worth by what I could give to others, by how much I could sacrifice for them. but in doing so, I had lost myself along the way. I thought about how I had poured myself into that Christmas Eve dinner, how I had hoped that tamales, just food, could bring us closer. But I realized now that I had been looking for something that wasn't there. Lucas's indifference wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a reflection of everything I had overlooked in my own life. It was time for me to stop giving for the sake of others and start living for myself. The days following Christmas Eve were heavy. The bitterness of Lucas's words still hung in the air like smoke that couldn't be cleared. Each time I closed my eyes, I could still hear them: poverty food, stuff poor people eat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had spent my whole life working for a future that was never going to be enough, not for Lucas, and certainly not for me. I sat in my little apartment more often than not, staring at the walls, at the peeling paint, the creaky floors, the space that had once felt like home, but now seemed more like a reminder of everything I hadn't achieved. But it wasn't just the apartment, it was my life. My whole existence had been spent surviving. I had worked myself to the bone trying to provide for Lucas, trying to keep the pieces together after Daniel passed. But where had it gotten me? The tamales, the sacrifice, the love, all of it dismissed not just by Lucas, but by the life I had been living. That night, as I sat with my thoughts, something shifted within me. I wasn't sure when it happened or even how, but I realized that something had to change. I couldn't keep going like this, holding my breath for a future that was never going to come, hoping for gratitude or recognition that would never be there. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was suffocating. For the first time in a long time, I asked myself, what do I deserve? And in that moment, I knew that I deserved more than just to exist. I deserved to live. I deserved a place where I could finally be free of the weight I had carried for so long, a place where I didn't have to prove myself to anyone, a place that I could call mine, where I could breathe without the constant reminder of sacrifice, regret, and rejection. So I made a decision, a bold decision. I found a small, weathered cottage on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, no shiny granite countertops, no sleek modern design like Lucas's home. It was old and worn with faded shutters and an overgrown garden that looked as though it had been left to grow wild for years. But there was something about it, something quiet and real, something that called to me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I knew it wasn't the kind of place I would have picked when I was younger, when I was still trying to keep up with everyone else. But it was the kind of place I needed now. It was mine. It was real. And most importantly, it was a symbol of something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in for a long time: hope. I bought the cottage. It wasn't a huge leap financially. Thankfully, I had saved over the years despite the struggles. But it felt like a giant step for me emotionally. For the first time, I was making a decision for myself. No one else. No more sacrificing for people who didn't see me. No more living for someone else's approval. It was time for me to build a future that was mine. The cottage had its flaws, its crooked floors, its old windows, its sagging roof. But that didn't matter. The imperfections made it more beautiful in my eyes. It wasn't about perfection. It was about peace. It was about finding a space where I could finally heal, where I could nurture myself in the same way I had always nurtured others. When I moved in, the place felt empty at first, like a new canvas waiting to be filled with memories and life. I spent hours cleaning, fixing what I could, and planting in the small garden out back. As I tended to the soil, I realized how much I had longed for this, how much I had been waiting to feel grounded again. I couldn't help but smile as I stood there looking at the small garden I'd begun to cultivate. There was something so profound about taking care of the earth, about watching something grow, because you put time and care into it. It was a reminder that even after all the years of struggling, I could still start fresh. I could still grow. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. This house wasn't just a place to live, it was a beginning. It was a declaration that I was worth more than just surviving. I was worthy of living, of thriving, of having a space where I could finally breathe without fear of being overlooked or dismissed. And as I stood there looking at the seeds I had planted, I knew that I wasn't just planting tomatoes or flowers. I was planting the future, my future. And for the first time in a long time, I could see it clearly. The days after I moved into the cottage passed quietly. There was a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years, but it wasn't just the solitude. It was the peace that comes with being in a space where you feel safe, where you finally have room to breathe. I spent my mornings tending to the garden and my afternoons unpacking the boxes I had left behind, but there was still something missing, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Even in my new home, I still felt a void, a longing for something deeper. Perhaps it was just the weight of years spent giving, without receiving the years I had spent working tirelessly unnoticed. I had spent so much time focused on survival that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly be seen. That's when I met Mr. Langley. It happened on a chilly autumn morning when I was searching for work, not for the money, but for a sense of purpose. I saw the ad posted on the small town board, a simple note that read, "Looking for help with cleaning, cooking, and light medical support. Inquire within." Something about the words spoke to me. It wasn't the job that intrigued me, it was the person who might need help. Mr. Langley lived in a modest aging home on the other side of town. When I knocked on his door, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect the warmth that greeted me. The door opened slowly, and there he was, an elderly gentleman with gentle eyes and a thick wool cardigan that seemed too big for him. He was trembling slightly, his hands shaking as he held the door. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm and soft. I introduced myself, and after a short conversation he invited me in. His home smelled of old books and warm tea, a stark contrast to the sterile environments I had grown accustomed to in the homes I cleaned. Mr. Langley didn't ask about my past, didn't inquire about my struggles. He simply asked if I was willing to help, and something in the way he looked at me made me feel like I was more than just a worker. As the days passed, I became a regular part of Mr. Langley's life. I helped him with his meals, tidied up his home, and sometimes just sat with him in the quiet afternoons. He was sharp despite his age, and though his body trembled, his mind was still quick. But what struck me the most was the way he treated me. He didn't look at me like I was someone who was just there to do a job. He didn't look at me with pity, or as if I were beneath him. He looked at me like I mattered, and that feeling of being seen, truly seen, was something I hadn't realized I had been craving for so long. It wasn't just about the work, it was about the respect, the validation, the sense of being more than just the sum of my labor. "Selena," he once said as I was cleaning his kitchen, "you clean like it's a prayer?" I stopped for a moment, unsure how to respond. "It kind of is," I said quietly, not really explaining myself, but knowing exactly what he meant. I wasn't just cleaning for the sake of cleanliness. I was putting my heart into it, just like everything else I had done in my life. Mr. Langley didn't ask for an explanation, nor did he need one. He simply accepted me as I was, and in doing so, he healed a part of me I hadn't even known was broken. He treated me with kindness, with dignity, in a way I hadn't experienced in years. And every time I walked out of his house, I felt a little lighter, as though the weight I had carried for so long was slowly being lifted, one small act of kindness at a time. He didn't just pay me for the work, I realized he was paying me in something far more valuable. His respect, his recognition, his quiet validation. It was a gift that filled the emptiness I hadn't known existed. And as I continued to help him, it was as though my heart was healing little by little. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was living. It had been a few months since I moved into the cottage. The first few weeks were quiet, peaceful, everything I had hoped for. I was starting to feel more like myself again, finding comfort in the rhythm of my days. The garden was blooming, and every morning I found myself smiling as I watered the plants I had carefully tended to. Each flower that blossomed felt like a small victory, a symbol of my new beginning. I was no longer just existing, I was truly living. But like the seasons, change has a way of creeping up on you, even when you think you finally found your peace. It came knocking one afternoon in the form of an unexpected visit. I was out back trimming the basil in my garden when I heard the creak of the gate. At first I thought it was just the wind, but the footsteps that followed were unmistakable. I wiped my hands on my pants and stood up, turning toward the house. There, standing in front of the porch, were Lucas and Vanessa. I froze. I hadn't seen them since Christmas Eve, and I certainly hadn't expected to see them on my doorstep. They hadn't called. There was no warning. They just showed up as if they still had the right to decide what was best for me. Mom Lucas said, his voice oddly soft, but still laced with that same sense of entitlement. We were just in the neighborhood. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood in the doorway, watching them, trying to process why they were here. The familiar weight of tension settled in my chest, but this time it was different. I was different. I had worked so hard to build a life where I didn't need to rely on their approval, where I could finally make my own decisions. Yet here they were walking in like they owned the place, just like they always had. Surprises are fun, right? Vanessa added, her smile tight, her tone sweet but hollow. It didn't take long for them to slip past me, moving through the house as if it were their own. I followed them inside, the old familiar sense of being out of place creeping back into my bones. I could feel my heart racing, my pulse quickening as they began making themselves at home, opening the fridge, glancing at the furniture, with that look of distaste they had always worn when it came to anything that wasn't perfect. "I mean, it's cozy," Lucas said, glancing around, his voice flat. "But it needs upgrades. You shouldn't be trying to cook with that old range. Gas is dangerous at your age." At my age, the words hit me harder than I expected. He didn't see me as me. He saw me as a problem, something to be fixed, something that needed to be managed. "We've been talking," Vanessa chimed in, her voice as smooth as it was condescending. "And we really think it's time you considered moving to a care facility. It would be easier for you. You shouldn't be living alone. It's not safe." I stared at them, at the way they stood there as if I weren't even part of the conversation. They were talking about my life, my decisions, as if they had any right to decide for me. My heart pounded in my chest. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they assumed I was incapable, the way they thought they could just waltz in and take control of everything again. "Lucas, Vanessa," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've already made my decision. I'm not going anywhere." Their faces tightened, but they didn't back down. Lucas pulled out a glossy brochure from his bag, flipping it open like a lawyer presenting a case. "We've done the research," he said, not even looking at me. "This place is highly rated. It's perfect for you. All the medical staff you could need, meal plans, activities. It's like a resort." I felt my stomach churn. They were treating me like a child, like I couldn't think for myself. They didn't care about my feelings, about what I had worked so hard to build here. All they saw was a woman who needed saving. And what's worse, they thought they had the right to save me. I was torn. The old patterns of compliance, of putting their needs above my own, tugged at me. But deep down, I knew better now. I had worked too hard to reclaim my sense of self, to finally stand on my own 2 feet, and I wasn't going to let them take that from me. I stood there, breathing slowly, looking at them both. "I'm not your project. I'm not a burden. And I certainly don't need you to decide what's best for me anymore." They were silent for a moment, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had expected me to fold, to give in. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "I'm not finished here," I said, my voice steady. "And neither are you." They didn't say anything more. They just turned, exchanging a look between them, and left, leaving me standing there in my own home, stronger than I had been before. It had been 3 days since Lucas and Vanessa's visit. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual, like a storm was brewing on the horizon, even though the skies outside remained clear. I spent the next few days in a daze, not sure how to process what had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that their visit was just the beginning of something much darker. They hadn't come to help me. They had come to take my life, my home, my dignity. The weight of it all settled deep in my bones. I knew they weren't done with me yet. But what could I do? I had worked so hard for this little cottage, for the peace I had fought to find. It had taken every ounce of my strength to make this life mine, to buy something that was truly mine, and now they were coming for it. The anger and frustration swirled inside me, but what could I do? I was just one woman. What power did I have against them? Then came the phone call. It was early in the morning, just after I had finished my first cup of coffee. The phone rang, startling me. I picked it up, and a calm, professional voice greeted me. "Is this Selina Duarte?" the voice asked. "Yes," I replied, my heart racing in my chest. "Who is this?" "This is David O'Connor. I was contacted by a Mr. Darius Redmond regarding your situation." I froze. Darius Redmond, the lawyer. What did he know about my situation? "Mr. Redmond mentioned that you might need some legal assistance," David continued. "We can help you with what's going on with your son and daughter-in-law." I sat there for a moment, the world suddenly becoming sharper, clearer. Darius had somehow found out about what Lucas and Vanessa were planning. My heart began to slow, a glimmer of hope, replacing the heavy weight that had been suffocating me. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady now. "Please." David was calm and reassuring as he explained the next steps. He had experience in elder law, and he had worked with people facing exactly what I was going through. He told me that Lucas and Vanessa were in the process of trying to declare me mentally unfit in order to take control of my assets. They were targeting my home, my future, everything I had worked for. "They can't do that," I said, almost to myself. "I've worked too hard for this." "They're going to try," David replied gently. "But that's why we need to act quickly. We'll gather the evidence, we'll protect your rights." David outlined the strategy. He would arrange for a certified geriatric specialist to come and evaluate me quietly and professionally, ensuring that my mental capacity was intact. He also advised me to begin recording conversations with Lucas and Vanessa using small devices he provided, so we had a record of their manipulative behavior. "You've got more power than you realize, Selina," he said. "We'll make sure they don't get away with this." I felt a sense of relief wash over me as he spoke. For the first time since that horrible visit, I felt like I had a real chance at protecting myself. It was a strange feeling, like someone had finally handed me the tools to fight back, to take control of my own life. In the following weeks, we set everything in motion. David and Darius worked behind the scenes, gathering the evidence needed to prove that I was capable, that I was in full control of my faculties. I started recording the conversations with Lucas and Vanessa, my heart racing every time they called or showed up at my door. They were relentless, trying to push their agenda under the guise of concern, but I was prepared now. When the time came for the evaluation, I sat in front of the specialist answering questions about my life, my memories, my plans for the future. I was nervous, but I knew I had nothing to hide. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't incapable. I was just a woman who had lived through a lifetime of hardships, and now I was standing tall, ready to fight for the life I had built. David assured me that the legal team was ready. He had already put together a solid case, one that would show Lucas and Vanessa for what they truly were, manipulative, self-serving individuals who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. But I wasn't going to let them take my future, not without a fight. And so, the battle began. With David O'Connor by my side, I felt stronger than I had in years. It wasn't just about protecting my home, it was about protecting my dignity, my independence, and my right to decide what happens to me. I wasn't going to let Lucas and Vanessa win, not this time. The day had come. I could feel the tension building in the pit of my stomach, but there was a quiet strength inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. I had spent far too long shrinking into the background, allowing Lucas and Vanessa to dictate the terms of my life. But not today. Not anymore. I had everything I needed now. The legal documents, the evidence, the recordings. I wasn't just standing on my own anymore. I had a team behind me, David O'Connor and Darius Redmond. They had prepared me for this moment, and I wasn't going to back down. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when I heard the familiar creak of the gate. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't feel the panic that had gripped me the last time they showed up. I knew what was coming. I had been preparing for this moment. Lucas and Vanessa arrived without warning, just as they always did. They pulled up in that same sleek SUV, their faces marked with that same smug confidence, as though they were entitled to everything they saw. They hadn't changed, but I had. I opened the door, and there they were. Lucas, as usual, looking irritated, and Vanessa dressed in her carefully curated image of perfection, as if nothing had changed. They didn't even seem to notice the calm that had settled in the house, the stillness that made it clear I wasn't afraid anymore. They weren't in control anymore. Mom, Lucas said, stepping forward with that familiar arrogance. "We've been talking, and we really think it's time for you to reconsider moving to a facility. It's just not safe here." I didn't let him finish. I stepped back, motioning for them to come inside. They were taken aback, but they followed me in, as if they had a right to. I could feel the weight of their presence in my own home, but I refused to let them intimidate me. David O'Connor was already waiting in the kitchen, his demeanor calm but firm, as if he had been here 1,000 times before. I introduced him to Lucas and Vanessa, watching as their eyes darted from me to him, unsure of what to expect. "I believe we have some business to take care of," David said smoothly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Selena, if you could." I walked over to the table where the legal documents were neatly laid out, the weight of them no longer a burden, but a shield. I picked up the papers, the ones that David had carefully prepared, documents that would prove my mental competence, the recordings of their manipulative behavior, and the legal notices that would shut down their entire scheme. I handed them over to Lucas, watching his face as he scanned the pages. "Your mother is perfectly capable of managing her own affairs?" David continued, his voice steady. "You and Vanessa are not in a position to make decisions for her, and this manipulation, it ends now." There was a long, painful silence as Lucas processed what was happening. He looked at the papers in his hand, then at me, his eyes narrowing. "You can't be serious." He spat, his voice rising with frustration. "You're siding with her? You don't understand. She's not well. I'm perfectly well, Lucas," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I've had enough of you making decisions for me without ever once asking me what I want. I'm not your project. I'm not your burden." Vanessa, who had been standing silently off to the side, finally spoke up. "This is ridiculous. You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "We were just trying to help you. Help me." I repeated, my voice rising just slightly. "You're not helping me. You're trying to take my home, my life. You think you know what's best for me, but you don't. You never have." David stepped in his presence, commanding, "You'll need to leave Lucas. And Vanessa, you've overstepped. There's no more room for your manipulation here." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of everything hanging in the air. Lucas's face flushed with anger, but I didn't flinch. He had no power over me anymore. I had taken that power back. Vanessa, ever the calm one, looked at me with an unreadable expression before she turned to Lucas. "Let's go," she said softly, almost as though the situation was beneath her. She didn't wait for him to reply, and together they walked out of the door, leaving me standing there with David. When the door clicked shut behind them, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I had been holding. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt before victory. David turned to me, his eyes soft with respect. "You did it," he said simply. "I did," I replied, a quiet smile creeping onto my face. I really did. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time in my life, I was in control of my own future, and no one, not Lucas or Vanessa or anyone else, would take that from me again. The door clicked shut behind Lucas and Vanessa, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't just that they had left my house, it was that I had finally stood up for myself. I had stopped being the passive bystander in my own life, allowing others to control my destiny. That moment when the door closed and the silence settled back into the house marked the beginning of something far more important than just getting rid of them. It marked my rebirth. For so long I had been living in the shadows of others, trying to prove my worth, trying to show them that I was enough. But no more. The legal battle had given me something I hadn't had in years: confidence. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I had fought for my independence, for my voice, and I had won. In the days that followed, I found myself standing in the garden, more often breathing in the fresh air, letting the peaceful solitude settle over me. The garden had become more than just a patch of earth, it had become my sanctuary. It symbolized everything I had fought for. The flowers bloomed, the tomatoes ripened on the vine, and the weeds I had once neglected were slowly pulled away, making space for new growth. Just like me. I spent my mornings in the garden, letting my hands dig deep into the soil, feeling the earth respond to my touch. I couldn't help but think that the flowers and plants weren't the only things growing, they were a reflection of me. Each new bud that bloomed, each vine that stretched toward the sun, was a testament to the strength I had found inside myself. I wasn't just tending to the garden anymore, I was tending to my soul. And as I healed, I found myself thinking about the other women in my community. I had always been so focused on my own survival, so consumed with the day-to-day struggles of just getting by, that I hadn't seen the other women around me who were silently suffering, facing the same battles I had faced. One afternoon, as I sat outside in the garden, a neighbor, Maria, came over to drop off some homemade bread. We had always exchanged pleasantries in passing, but this time something in her eyes told me she needed to talk. Over coffee on the porch, she told me about her own struggles, how her son had recently started making decisions for her, how she felt invisible in her own home, how her own daughter-in-law had been quietly trying to take control of her life. Her story mirrored my own, and I knew I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I shared what I had learned, what had helped me regain control of my own life. I told her about the lawyer David O'Connor, who had helped me fight for my rights, about the legal resources that were available, about the steps she could take to protect herself. I didn't just listen, I offered real advice, the kind of help I wish I'd had when I was in her shoes. As I helped Maria, I realized something that took me by surprise. I wasn't just healing for myself, I was healing by helping others. Each time I shared what I had learned, each time I offered support, I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't known in years. I wasn't alone in this anymore, and neither was Maria. And just as my garden had flourished, so too did my sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than myself. I reached out to more women in the community, offering them the same support, the same guidance. Some were hesitant, afraid to speak up, afraid to take the first step toward reclaiming their lives. But I understood. I had been there. I had been the woman too scared to ask for help, too ashamed to admit I was drowning. But now I was the one lifting them up. And with every woman I helped, I felt my own healing deepen, my own strength solidify. I had been surviving for so long, but now I was thriving. I was no longer just a woman who had been pushed down by life's struggles. I was a woman who had risen, and in doing so, I was helping others rise with me. This was my new purpose, my new mission. I wasn't just tending to a garden anymore, I was tending to the women around me, and in doing so, I was finally tending to my own heart. In the end, the garden wasn't just a symbol of growth, it was a testament to the power of reclaiming your life, your worth, and your voice. And it was a reminder that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we come together, when we lift each other up, and when we choose to thrive, not just survive. The days following Lucas and Vanessa's departure were filled with a quiet, steady calm. I had made the choice to sever ties with them, not just physically, but emotionally as well. For so long, I had allowed their disrespect to take up space in my life, but no more. I didn't need their approval, and I certainly didn't need their manipulation. The house was mine now, my safe space, my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. There were times when I missed the idea of what a family should be, of what I had hoped Lucas and I could have. But those feelings were fleeting now. The pain of his betrayal, the disappointment of seeing how little he valued me, had finally begun to fade. It wasn't about forgiveness, at least not yet. It was about freedom. Freedom from the ties that had bound me for so long. Freedom from the constant ache of trying to prove myself to him, to anyone. I wasn't just healing physically, I was healing emotionally, spiritually. The days felt lighter as I settled into my new life, the life I had fought so hard to create. In the mornings, I would find peace, in the quiet rhythm of gardening, the simple act of tending to the earth becoming a form of meditation. I would pull weeds from the garden, my hands covered in soil, and with every plant that sprouted, every flower that bloomed, I felt a little more whole. It was like nature itself was reminding me that growth takes time, and that sometimes the most beautiful things emerge after the hardest struggles. But even as I found peace in my small home, I knew that there was more. I wanted to do more. I wanted to leave behind. I had spent so many years surviving, so many years making sure others had what they needed, that I had never stopped to think about the legacy I wanted to leave. Now, with a newfound sense of clarity, I realized that I wanted my home to serve a higher purpose, to continue to provide safety and support for others long after I was gone. The decision came to me one evening as I sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the world felt still as if it too was taking a deep breath. That's when I knew I wanted to donate the house. I wanted to give it to a foundation that would provide safe homes for women in need, for women who were facing the same struggles I had faced, women who needed a place to heal, to rebuild, just as I had. I wanted this house to be a symbol of strength, of hope, and of the power of community. This was the legacy I wanted to leave behind, a space where women could find peace, where they could feel valued, and where they could rebuild their lives without fear of judgment or manipulation. It felt like the right thing to do, the only thing to do. The house had been a place of healing for me, and now it could be the same for others. I contacted a local organization that worked with women in need, and they were thrilled at the idea. They explained how my home would be a refuge, a place of safety for women who had nowhere else to turn. It was a small but significant step, and one that filled me with a sense of purpose that I hadn't known I was missing. The process wasn't easy. There were legal papers to sign, logistics to work out, but each step I took in that direction felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I had spent my life giving so much of myself to others, and now I was giving something that would continue to help long after I was gone. As I sat in the quiet of my home, reflecting on everything I had been through, I realized that this was my true victory. I wasn't just leaving behind a house, I was leaving behind a legacy of strength, of resilience, and of compassion. It was the kind of legacy that would help others, the kind of legacy that would keep my spirit alive in the hearts of those who needed it most. I smiled to myself as I looked out at the garden, the flowers swaying gently in the breeze. I had found peace. I had found purpose. And I knew deep in my soul that I was finally living the life I was meant to live. At 69, I find myself sitting in the same garden that once symbolized my struggle. The quiet rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the steady growth of the plants I've nurtured it all, reminds me of how far I've come. What began as a small, weathered cottage in need of love has transformed into a sanctuary, a place of strength and peace. The house, the garden, they are reflections of me. They are not just structures or soil. They are embodiments of the quiet resilience that has carried me through a lifetime of challenges. As I sit here, I realize something profound. This is not the end of my journey. For so long, I was defined by what others thought of me, by Lucas's dismissive words, by the roles I had to play, by the expectations placed on me. But now I am no longer defined by them. I've learned that I do not need their validation. My worth isn't measured by the approval of others. It's measured by the strength I have found in myself, the courage I've summoned to live life on my own terms. This life I've built, this peace I've found, is not a final destination. It's a new beginning. A beginning where I am free to be who I truly am, without fear of judgment, without the burden of past expectations. It's a beginning where I choose to live for myself, where I can thrive, not just survive. I have spent my years giving, loving, and surviving, but now I am living fully, truly, and unapologetically. The garden blooms, and so do I, and for the first time in my life, I know that I am enough, not because of what others see in me, but because of what I see in myself. In the journey of life, we often find ourselves caught in the expectations of others, constantly trying to prove our worth and measure up to standards that don't align with our true selves. Emma's story is a poignant reminder that at some point we all must stop living for others and start living for ourselves. The weight of rejection, the sting of betrayal, and the burden of expectation can only be carried for so long before they break us down. But in that breaking, there is room for transformation. Emma's decision to reclaim her life, her home, her peace, her independence is an act of defiance against a world that often wants us to shrink, to conform, and to stay invisible. It's a reminder that no matter how old we are entitled to live a life of dignity, self-respect, and purpose. The garden she tended to symbolizes not just the literal growth of plants, but the growth of her spirit, a growth that is nurtured when we take ownership of our own lives, free from the judgment of others. It's time we all stop living in the shadows of others' expectations. Let's embrace the quiet defiance of living authentically, owning our decisions, and prioritizing our well-being. Just like Emma, we all deserve a life where we thrive, not just survive. If you've ever felt like you're living for someone else, or if you've struggled to find your own voice, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about reclaiming our lives and embracing the strength within us all. The time for living authentically is now.